Hello, I'm Jake Boudreau, civic journalist at Tello Community Television. This week, on The Record, I spoke with the Progressive Conservative MLA for Richmond about Pondville Beach Provincial Park. Then I spoke with an NDP MLA from Breton about a number of issues. But first, municipal election results from Richmond County. In District 1, incumbent Sean Sampson won with 74% of the vote, earning a 431 vote majority with 657 votes to 226 for former Richmond warden and longtime municipal councillor James Goyesh. In District 2, first-time municipal candidate Lois Landry defeated incumbent Michael Digdon by 310 votes after she received 558 votes to 248 for Digdon. Congratulations, Lois. According to the results, you won a pretty decisive victory in District 2. How do you feel?
Oh, I'm very grateful to the voters. I'm very grateful to folks from across District 2, not just for the votes, but for just how gracious everybody was on the doorsteps and the opportunity that they gave me to come into their homes and stand on their doorsteps, and certainly this opportunity to represent them at council.
And so this is your first time on council, and I suppose you're looking at some kind of learning period, but you did sit on some council committees, so it's not like you're totally unfamiliar with council and the municipality itself.
Right, and much of how council functions is very similar to how governance is structured in several boards, and I sit on several of those boards, some provincial and some that are legislated boards. So it is a new table to be sitting around, but not a table of sorts that I'm not familiar with. And yes, I did sit on the policy committee twice, once with just the past council and then the council before that as well. Yeah.
So it must be nice to have a clear mandate from the voters, nice decisive victory, and I assume leading off from what we talked about previously, you have some priorities that you'd like to work on as soon as you get sworn in.
Yeah, and I have meetings with residents scheduled Monday morning, but I would have had those anyway. But yeah, there's certainly a number of things I'd like to do to connect with community groups, connect with voters. It's election day is a snapshot in time, and to sort of rest on those results is a mistake. There's work to be done every day, and there's people that you serve every day for the next 4 years. So there's work to be done, and that'll start this week.
Mm-hmm. And so it's a 4-year term, and over the next 4 years, it's hard to say what could happen. I mean, there are some issues right now that are big, but might not loom as large in 4 years' time, and others that are not as significant now, but could really loom large. So it's really hard to say what can come up.
It's so true. There are so many initiatives and plans that we see in the media around hydrogen, around housing, around coastal protection, that 4 years from it will be a busy 4 years, and those things may change the landscape. We certainly saw what the impact of global pandemic has, and we are going to see sometime between now and next October 2 elections, one at the provincial level and one at the federal level, and that may very well change the landscape of our interactions with provincial or federal governments. But I think our priority in council is to make sure that we're working effectively with every representative from each level of government, and we likely will see some change. We certainly will see a change in government, mayoral position in Sydney because the incumbent is not running. So there'll be changes all around us, and that's significant as well.
Mm-hmm. Now, the mayor in Port Hawkesbury was re-elected tonight, so you'll have someone that you guys are familiar dealing with in a very close by neighboring municipality.
Yeah, absolutely. And, we're not a big community, so I know a couple of the folks who have been elected there. I know a number of folks who have been elected in Inverness. I've had the opportunity to work with them, some folks in CBRM as well. So looking forward to sharing concerns and ideas and networking and working strategically with all of our neighboring municipal partners.
Well, congratulations again, and thank you very much for giving me some time before you have some celebrations.
Great, thank you very much. And thanks again to Tellil for making this easy for everybody to stay on top of. Thanks.
And in District 4, Richmond Warden Amanda Mumberket staved off a challenge from former municipal councillor Gilbert Boucher, winning the district by 260 votes after she received 624 votes to 364 for Boucher. We had three pretty decisive victories tonight from the winning councillors or councillors to be in some cases. So what was your reaction to?
I don't know if there was too many surprises, although I think I expected, I may have expected some closer results in some polls, but it's always hard to know. I find, especially when you don't live directly in an area, sometimes it's hard to predict that kind of thing. Just want to congratulate the three victors tonight and thank the other three for putting their names forward.
You have a new councillor going to be joining council in Lois Landry. Sean Sampson's returned in District 1. Lois Landry is elected for the first time in District 2. And you have Amanda Mumberket coming back to council in District 4. So to make up a council slightly different, and I was just speaking with Lois Landry, and she is, of course, on some municipal committees and is pretty familiar with the way things work. So it looks like she's going to fit in pretty good, and is not going to be someone that's going to require a lot of time to learn her position, I guess.
Yeah, and I think that's great because, I mean, one of the big disadvantages we had last time was 5 people coming in brand new. I mean, in some ways, it could be nice, but on the other hand, it was a learning curve for everybody. In some ways, I mean, it was nice to get to learn these things at the same time, but it would have also been nice to have a couple of sort of veteran counselors to help ease that transition, I guess, at the beginning.
And there's going to be a number of things to tackle in this upcoming term. I know I spoke with some of the councillors and candidates, and a lot of things they spoke about surrounded housing, economic development, affordability seemed to be a big thing with some candidates. And so there's going to be quite a few things and issues coming up in this 4-year term.
Yeah, it's always hard to say how things will go. We'll play it as it comes, I guess. But I think those are definitely the big things, is affordability and housing are probably the big issues. And then, seeing what's on the horizon for the economic development, it could be an interesting 4 years.
Mm-hmm. Then, of course, there's things that just kind of come out of nowhere, right? There's some issues that today don't seem as significant, but in 4 years, they really become significant, kind of. So it's hard to tell and it's hard to plan, but that something's going to come up that probably isn't apparent today.
That's exactly it. It's always interesting sometimes to look back on these things 4 years later and, what you thought may have been coming around the corner and maybe did or didn't. It can be very different a couple of years in than what you expected.
Now, one thing, you look at the results and they're pretty decisive. Each candidate and councillor incumbent that won with a pretty commanding victory. So it looks like the voters have sent them a pretty clear mandate. And I suppose that'll provide some stability, I guess, too, for council in this term.
I think so, yeah. I hope so anyway. We'll see how it goes, but I mean, I'm looking forward to getting started, getting back at it.
And you guys are going to be having the swearing-in ceremony later this month sometime. I think the date has been set for that.
I believe it's October 30th, first,
yes.
I know, yeah.
Yes, and then once the new council is sworn in, then you guys are going to be voting for the positions of warden and deputy warden at that time, right?
Yeah, from what I understand, that'll happen on the night of the 30th, and then I believe we'll be getting together on the 31st during the day to sort out committee assignments and so on.
Right. Yeah. And then from there, yeah, like you said, you guys are going to be hitting the ground running, and then it's going to be working and meeting from there.
Yeah, and I mean, with 3 returning councillors and 1 councillor was here in the past, and I'm sure Lois will have no problem fitting in here. I think it should work smoothly, and it'll be good to get back to work.
Mm-hmm. And maybe get your reaction to what took place in Hawkesbury, our neighboring municipality, where Brenda Chisholm-Beaton was returned as mayor, albeit with a smaller majority, but someone you guys are familiar with working with, and who you guys have been able to do some good things with in the past, and I imagine you guys hope that that's going to continue in this term.
Yeah, I hope so, and I think there's a good relationship there, and as well as that, I believe from what I heard so far, there's only 1 incumbent returning, but so they'll have a few new faces, but it's sure it's going to be an interesting few years for them as well, and a bit of a learning curve for the new people. However, that luckily they've got a couple of people to help them along.
That's great. Well, I appreciate you taking time. I know you were here in Ayrshire to watch the results, and some interesting results for sure, and appreciate you taking some time out of your evening.
Yeah, no, thanks for asking about it. It was fascinating. This is the first time I've ever sort of attended this in person, because especially last time, we had some COVID restrictions. I remember we were separated at two separate houses and making phone calls back and forth, and living a good 40 minutes away from the municipal office. I didn't really have time to run over here to get the results afterwards, so just stayed home and waited for phone calls. But this was really fascinating to watch it.
In the town of Port Hawkesbury, where all voting was done electronically or over the phone, incumbent Mayor Brenda Chisholm-Beaton had a 30-vote majority, earning 723 votes to 693 votes for Archie McLaughlin and 314 votes for Town Councillor Jason O'Coin. In the race for Port Hawkesbury Town Council, Ian Langley was the top vote getter with 1,229 votes. In second place was Todd Barrett with 1,027. Paula Hart was in third place with 934. And Town Councillor Blaine Macquarie earned the final spot with 835 votes. Those who did not receive enough votes to be elected to Town Council were Town Councillor Mark McIver with 820, Donald McDonald with 718, and Mike Curry, who got 191 votes. Although he was on the ballot, Terrence Matthews withdrew from the race, and any votes for him were recorded as spoiled ballots. In the plebiscite, which asked town residents, would you like to see Reeve Street return to the 2019 four-lane configuration, 1,018 people voted yes, and 673 people voted no. With me is Richmond MLA Trevor Boudreau. Welcome back.
Thank you, Jake. Thanks for having me.
So when we spoke last spring, you mentioned there was an artifact found at the site off Gibbs Lane where the new parking lot for Pondville Beach Provincial Park was to be moved, and this caused a delay in that project this year. Aaron Lynch, Communications Advisor with the Department of Natural Resources and Renewables, told me via email on October 10th that as part of the planning process for the parking lot, an archaeological assessment was completed, which is standard procedure when a project involves disturbing the ground. She said at the time that the Department of Communities, Culture, Tourism, and Heritage is waiting for the final report on the most recent testing that was undertaken this summer before any steps can be determined. And that's essentially what you told me too when we spoke last spring. Can you provide an update on what's going on there right now?
Yeah, so from my perspective and my understanding from conversations with the department, it's kind of exactly kind of what Aaron has said, is that, look, it's, when an artifact or something is found of significance, then CCTH, Communities, Culture, Tourism, and Heritage, kind of takes over kind of that realm, right? It's kind of moved out of NRR and brought over to them to do the types of important assessments that need to be done to make sure, like something of significance, is found. So really, my understanding is they're waiting on that final report. I do know, my understanding is there is still a bit more, digging that has to be done. But for all intents and purposes, that's what they're waiting for. And then after that's done, then NRR can move forward with the plans that they have for the park.
So is there an expectation that the work will take place to move the parking lot from its current location to that crown land off Gibbs Lane? And is there a timeline, or do you have an expectation on when that might occur?
Look, I would say given the time of the year that we're at, it's probably likely that work unfortunately won't happen this year. But it's still the intent to do it as soon as it possibly can. So my expectation would be that, come the spring, that the department would be moving forward, considering that all things would be, through that report that CCTH gets is, allows for that to move forward at that time. So it's hard to timeline these types of things when you're waiting on a report from CCTH, right? I fully respect the desire and the wants of residents. I'm certainly in the same boat. I'd love to see this happening yesterday, but and I would say the department feels the same way. But I would say that you have to do things right, and this is one of those times where I think the proper things are being done to make sure that it's the right thing to do and the right place to do it, and in a timely manner. My expectation is that will get done.
So the plans for that parking lot, it still includes bathrooms and change rooms, and the size is the same as it was. Nothing has changed as far as those plans, as far as you know.
Yeah, as far as I know, the plans are still the same. I would say, there also needs to be a bit of flexibility. If something comes back that has to adjust how things are, you have to plan accordingly. But from my understanding, everything that has been designed for that area is still the plan as of now.
In a statement issued on September 15th, Premier Tim Houston said because of the inability to reach a funding agreement with the federal government over work on the Chignecto Isthmus, some provincial projects are in jeopardy. But when I spoke with Cape Breton Council Mike Kellaway, he had a different take on it. He said the federal government offered to pay 50% of project costs. So I guess there's some wrangling over financial commitments. But what Houston said is one of the projects in jeopardy is a $2 million project to move the parking lot and fix the wharf at Pondville Beach. Now, when I spoke to people in the community and some officials in that, they really didn't seem to know anything about that. And then when I contacted the Department of Natural Resources and Renewables earlier this month, Erin Lynch said planning and design is ongoing for improvements at Pondville Beach, and that is still the case. She said this year the focus was on relocating the parking lot. She went on to note that the aim for next year is to cap the wharf with armor stone. But since the work to the parking lot hasn't taken place yet, is the work to the wharf going to happen next year, or is that on the same timeline?
Yeah, I mean, my understanding from it all is that there's an amount of funding that has been provided to do the initial work, whether it's the groundwork like we're talking about on Gibbs Lane, as well as the detailed analysis and looking at the detailed design of how that cap is going to happen on the wharf, and then the wharf money, then they'll have a better idea of how much that wharf capping will cost, right? What I would say about any type of coastal work, it's expensive work and it's complicated work, and so the idea that a set amount of money or whatever it is what it is right now, that can change, and it can alter kind of decisions that are made. But what I would say is the conversations I've had with Natural Resources is that the intent is still very much there. I think they understand the importance of parks across the province, and the importance of Pondville Beach to the residents in Ilmadam and to everybody who visits it. So I would say the goal is still to continue the work that has been part of the statement that they made, the management statement, the management plan for Pondville. So that is still the intent that I've had the conversation of. I've heard nothing different.
Okay, so as far as that $2 million, I guess what you're saying is that could change, and it's hard to say if it's going to be 2 million exactly. I guess is what you're saying.
Yeah, like I would come back to the number of 2 million was not something that I had heard before. Like my understanding is like they're looking at these projects and they evaluate them at the time that they're doing them or just before them or with design, and you identify how much those costs are as those projects are moving. So I don't have numbers to share. I don't know that, but the intent is to do the projects as have been proposed and evaluated, and what the costs are, the department will understand better once all that detailed analysis is done.
So yeah, and as far as the wharf goes, like they're saying they want to cap the wharf with armor stone, and that's not resurfacing. That's just basically putting large rocks and boulders on top of what's already there, type of thing, to keep it as a barrier. Is that your understanding of that?
Well, what I would say is like we know that wharf provides some protection to the beach as it stands right now, and I think what is very important is about keeping the integrity of the beach. And part of what the armor stone will do is do that. I can't speak to the design work of what it'll actually look like or how that will shape. I would say, from seeing armor stone being put in, on wharfs or near wharfs, it gets built up. But what that design looks like, I'm not aware of it at this point. So.
Okay. Now, not just the wharf and the parking lot, the walkways have been removed as well down at the beach, as I'm sure you're aware. So are there plans to replace the walkways at some point down there?
I think when we had our the meeting in Rocky Bay with officials from NRR, and we talked about kind of the wants and needs of the residents, along with how that dune structure is changing and how that is shifting, and how all of that comes into play when they're planning. And again, it comes down to, people want and need access to that beach. And so I haven't had any conversations in terms of specifics with how that will look or what that will look like, but ensuring that people have access to the beach will, of course, be important.
Also, along the side of the beach, running towards the wharf and around the seawall, also around the boat launch area, there's been quite a bit of erosion, as you know. And are the plans still in place to do some reinforcement of the shoreline in those and other areas around the beach, as far as you know?
I honestly haven't had any conversations about that particular component. But I think it's important to make sure that we engage with the department to ensure that, like, we're all on the same page moving forward. I would say the department, myself as the MLA, and all the residents, we want to see, Pondville be sustainable for the long haul and the long future. So having those conversations will be important in the future. Their focus, I think, at the beginning was making sure they had those, that parking area and those washroom facilities. And then, my understanding, the second part was the capping or the evaluation of the wharf. And then, I think it continues to move from that trajectory.
Is it conceivable that the federal government might be brought in to help maybe fund or do some of the work on that shoreline erosion problem?
Listen, it's always great when we can partner with other levels of government. These are provincial assets; they're provincial parks. I'm not aware of federal governments being engaged in provincial park type of work, but always willing to have those conversations. I think it's always good when levels of government are having conversations together about significant projects and significant pieces of infrastructure in our communities.
Okay. Well, that's great. I really appreciate you taking time out of your busy schedule to answer my questions and speak to our viewers about what's going on at the beach.
No, I appreciate the opportunity, and again, congrats to Talil on 30 years of doing this type of thing, because it's important. We're very fortunate in Richmond County to have a local broadcasting like this, so that we can share information and make sure that residents understand what's going on in their community. So again, thank you to all of you there.
With me is Breton Centre-Whitney Pier MLA Kendra Coombes. Welcome back.
Thank you for having me.
Despite Tim Houston campaigning on a promise to fix healthcare in 2021, your party claims that Nova Scotians are struggling to get their healthcare needs met, noting that wait times are worse than ever, be it for tests or ER wait times. The NDP also says that lack of attachment to a primary care provider is another major issue. When the Houston government was elected in August 2021, there were 71,666 Nova Scotians on the Need a Family Practice Registry. As of October 4th, that now stands at 145,114 Nova Scotians. Has healthcare gotten worse under this government?
Yes, it has. The government says that there's a lot of places to go for healthcare, but that's the problem. It's all patchwork. People, there are hundreds of thousands of people unattached to a health home or a health hub, which is your visit, which is a family doctor, and that. So many of them are unattached. And when you're not attached to a health home, you are not getting all the care that you need. You're not being seen by someone who is monitoring your care all the time and has your records and knows you as a patient. And so there are people who are falling through the cracks. They are not getting the treatments that they might need. They're not getting the care or the follow-ups that they need. And we are seeing longer wait times in places like emergency rooms, where people are packing not only a breakfast, lunch, and they're also packing suppers. You know, they're in it for their long waits. There's lots of long waits. We're still seeing emergency rooms closing. Urgent cares used to be the day of. Now you're calling to try and get in to an urgent care center. And when certain areas are done for the day, they're literally done. They just say, you know what, it's now this time of day, even though you've been waiting for hours, you're not going to be seen. You have to go somewhere else. This is what we're seeing in our healthcare system. That is not the promise that was made by the Houston government. The Houston government said that they were going to promise that they were going to fix healthcare, and healthcare was going to get better every day under this government, and we have not seen that happen. Especially not in my ridings. My constituents have not seen it.
Also, on the healthcare file, your party called on the Auditor General to investigate the Houston government's use of travel nurse agencies and review the value Nova Scotians are getting from the money being spent. NDP leader Claudia Chender said the province spends millions to hire travel nurses from private agencies to address shortages in the system, but more should be done to fill these vacancies with full-time permanent staff. Your leader said what is needed are long-term solutions to address the health staffing crisis and ensure that nurses want to live and work in Nova Scotia. Your party has been advocating a public travel nursing program like Manitoba for the past 2 years. The NDP noted that the Canadian Federation of Nurses Unions released a report on the use of agency nurses or travel nurses in Canada. The report called agency nurse spending a, quote, black box, where there is limited, and I use this quote, oversight or reporting of how public funds are being used. The report found that agency nurses earn much more than non-agency nurses and recommended that provincial auditor generals should investigate their costs. The September budget update revealed that the Department of Health and Wellness is reporting increased spending on agency nursing of 17.8 million, above the already budgeted 80 million. My question is, if full-time permanent staff cannot be found, then isn't it vital that travel nurses be used in the meantime?
Listen, this is our problem. This government keeps saying, well, they can't be found. These nurses can't be found. But the question is, what have they been doing to retain and recruit public system nurses? That is the question here, because they've said the same thing about doctors, that they can't recruit doctors yet. I've heard from doctors who lived in Nova Scotia, left to go elsewhere to train, want to come back to Nova Scotia to work, and they're having a harder time than anybody trying to get back into Nova Scotia to work as a physician. The same thing can be said for nurses. We have nurses. Why aren't they what's happening at Nova Scotia Health, that we are losing nurses and we can't retain or attract some nurses? And that is where we need to focus our money on. If we're spending so much money for a private agency, that's money we're not spending into our public healthcare system and on our public healthcare nurses.
Another topic tackled by the NDP is affordability. Your party noted that Nova Scotia has some of the highest poverty and food insecurity rates in the country, and many are finding it difficult to find or keep an affordable home. The NDP is charging that the government is acting too slowly to create affordable housing. Is it fair to say in the press release, you said that the Premier is favoring his developer friends and not helping the homeless and insecure? Is it fair to say that?
Yes. What we are seeing in we heard it in the House, the nonprofits who've received some money not only started their builds, but have finished builds. And people are in homes because of them. What we are seeing in the private sector is developers who have said, we don't want to do affordable housing. That's not part of our budget plans to do affordable housing. So if we're giving developers money who have not finished a housing start as of yet, that have received money, and who have said they don't want to be in the business of affordable housing because they need to recoup the money that they've spent on their builds, then what are we doing? How are we going to get these units affordable? If these developers are saying we don't want to even be in the business of it, we want to make money. And so that's what, but yet these developers keep getting contracts, and we don't even know how much if any in these contracts have they put aside for affordable housing. And we can't get this government to even define what they're considering affordable housing. Because affordable housing for most are defined by 30% of your income going to your household. So that's your rent or what have you. That's rent geared to income. That's how public housing defines it. But yet we cannot get this government or the Minister of Housing to define affordable housing. And so when you're having developers receiving contracts from the government, when we can't even tell how much of that's actually going to be affordable, when the contractors or the developers, are also in the papers saying they want to recoup their loss, not keep losing, and they don't want to be in the business of it.
Also, under the banner of affordability, your party is calling on the government to allow service industry workers to keep their tips, noting that customers may not know where their tips are going. Your leader said most service industry workers, like servers, bartenders, and cooks, make below a living wage and rely on tips to survive. Can legislation help these workers, and how would that happen?
Yes, it can. We have legislation on the table. This is outright tip theft. This is owners using the tips that we as customers are giving our service staff for excellent service and for the hard work that they're doing. And we're expecting it to go to their pockets. Instead, what is happening in the industry and in some restaurants, not all, but it's happening, is that the owner's management is using it to pad their books, and use it to pay expenses, and that rather than it actually going where it's supposed to go, it's outright tip theft. It's theft. It's outright tip theft. And legislation can be created that says you are not allowed to do this. It is illegal to take the tips and use it for your expenses, as well as the earnings of the business.
Is there any worry of some overreach on the part of government to kind of dictating to businesses, how they spend that money, or is it just
but it's not their money.
Moral thing,
But it's not their money. It's that service staff's money. It's that person who served you at the restaurant. It's their money. That's their money. The money you paid as a customer for the food, and that goes to the company. But the extra money that you decided to give to that service, that staffer, that's their money. That's not the company's money.
On the housing file, your party asserts that young Nova Scotians deserve a future with homes they can afford. With housing prices continuing to rise sharply, the NDP claims that buying a home has only gotten more difficult. An RBC study from last year found that more than 2/3 of Canadians aged 18 to 34 felt that buying a home is more out of reach compared to their parents. According to the Nova Scotia Association of Realtors, the average house in Nova Scotia costs around $452,000. Would the NDP's Homes Within Reach plan address housing affordability as well as the housing crisis, and how would the plan achieve that?
Well, the one thing is, what we've decided in the NDP is that we need all hands on deck to deal with the housing crisis. And one thing is, I myself, had been someone who said I may never own my own home. I had said that a lot because of the market. It's way too expensive for many people you know, 30, 40 plus years and the 40 and younger, it's becoming increasingly difficult for this age group that I'm also in to afford to put that down payment down. Because most of us are working precarious jobs. So it's hard to get that loan. It becomes increasingly difficult. So if we can help by helping, you know, with the homes within reach, if we can help somebody secure that loan or that down payment in order for them to buy their home, then the one thing we're doing is we're eliminating those that are, we are eliminating those people who from renting. So now we have rental units that are now available for those who need or want to rent. That opens up that gap. So that helps there. And then the other part of that is not just relying on building, helping those buy and secure homes, but it's also a bigger picture of how do we help renters? How do we, as government, need to build more public housing? Help the nonprofit sector who wants to build housing. It's a holistic approach to housing is what we're looking at. How do we help those who want to own? How do we help those who want to rent or those who want to build rental units for affordable housing?
After the Liberals dissolved school boards across the province in 2018, the NDP is now calling for their reinstatement. Your party said the Houston government promised to bring them back during the 2021 election, but the NDP claims they abandoned their promise 3 years later with no justification. The NDP said it would establish a committee to design the reintroduction of the school board model and have school boards in place by September 2025. I recall when the school boards were dissolved, there wasn't a lot of opposition, or there didn't seem to be much opposition. And in the years since, I haven't really caught that there was a lot of push for that. Am I incorrect, or is
you're absolutely incorrect? Ask any parent who has had to come up against their regional center for education for their child, and you will have a parent who wants an elected official back, who's accountable to them. I deal with it almost every day in my office. I spent most of late August into today dealing with Center for Education issues that a school board should be dealing with. We have a school bus busing shortage that's not being addressed. A school board would have been held accountable to address that. And we're not claiming, the NDP is not making a claim. We're stating a fact. The Houston government, Tim Houston, the premier of this province, promised when he was a candidate that he would bring back school boards. And he's had these few years to do that and has refused to do that. And so we're not claiming it. It's a simple fact. He hasn't done it. And the Minister of Education doesn't, every time we bring it up, the Minister of Education just ignores it. So it's not a claim, it's a fact. They've done that. People want the school boards back, and the NDP, we have never wavered. From the day the Liberals announced that they were going to dissolve the school boards until today, we have always stayed firm that the decision making for schools needs to be at the local level, and there needs to be an elected body for that. We have never wavered from that from that viewpoint since 2017, when my colleagues sat in the legislature for 24-hour periods fighting these decisions. And it's highly important that they have an elected body, that parents have a place to go to put in grievances with decisions that are being made within the school board.
Is there any concern about adding maybe another layer of bureaucracy or the cost of reinstating it?
I think the cost is negligible, but also it's a democratic process. But it's not a bureaucracy process that we'd be adding. We'd be reinstating a democratic process where these people are elected by the communities, by the voters, and they are held accountable by the voters, and they are making decisions in the open and transparent decisions are being made. That is what we'd be reinstating.
Your party introduced legislation requiring the Houston government to enact the Coastal Protection Act. The Coastal Protection Act passed in the legislature with all party support in 2019. The NDP legislation would require the act to be made into law by January 1st, 2025. While your party noted that Nova Scotians want their coastlines protected, the government maintains, and I've spoken with some MLAs and cabinet ministers, there's a lot of opposition to such a move and not much support. So is this a case where what people need is more important than what they want, or is it not true what they're saying, that there actually are a lot of people that do want some legislation?
So when people came to law amendments all those years ago, there was a great support for coastal protection. There's been great support by community, by voters, by constituents, by residents who believe in coastal protection. I don't know who these people are. I don't know if these are developers who want to develop along the coast, or what, because the government's never released those people, those studies or those, they've never released those consultations that they've done. I remember seeing them as far as I'm concerned. So I don't know where they're talking about. I live on the coast. I'm sure, and I'm from where you are. I'm pretty sure you're around the coast. Our coast is eroding, and it is dangerous. And people are still building right on the water. And at some point, the water is going to meet their home and take it out. It is dangerous. We do need to protect our coastline. And for the Premier to not recognize the need to have a Coastal Protections Act that has a law that everybody can follow is wrong. We need this act didn't pass the legislature with all party support for nothing. It was well supported. And he was one of them. He was one of those votes in the legislature. And if there had been real opposition to this bill, then why did he vote for it to begin with? So I don't know why he doesn't want to vote, why he didn't want to enact it. I'm sure a lot of people have their theories, but it's important that we protect our coastline, because that is what's protecting us from what they're seeing in Florida. What we just saw in Florida, our coastlines are protecting us from that, and we need to protect it in order to protect ourselves as well, and our homes and our properties. Because if we don't, we're going to be in dire straits, and we're going to be leaving we're going to leave a poor legacy for our children and our children's children. Like, that's just, and I'll say this about democracy and local government. There are many small municipalities that cannot afford a bylaws officer to deal with coastal protection, because that's where the Premier's leaving it on. He's leaving it at the hands of municipalities. And there's many municipalities that don't have real planning, that can't afford the full planning departments that the bigger municipalities have, like Halifax. Even CBRM has a planning department, but others don't have that big planning department that other areas have. And they don't have access to the resources that the bigger municipalities such as HRM have. So this is what this bylaw would do. It'd be a uniformed bylaw, or a uniformed provincial law for all Nova Scotians, for all Nova Scotia coastlines, rather than patchworks of legislation and things like that, and patchworks of enforcements.
My final question surrounds the rumors of a provincial election that may be called soon, and voters could be going to the polls sometime next month. What are you hearing? And do you think that Nova Scotians want an election now, right after a lengthy municipal election?
Yeah, I've heard the rumors, but I heard the rumors back in the summer too. We'll have to wait and see if the premier makes that walk to OneGov, or not, sorry, not to OneGov, to Government House, to our new lieutenant governor, or our new LG, and see how that goes. But do Nova Scotians want to go to the polls? I don't think so. I think Nova Scotians want their elected officials to work for them. They want the premier to actually fix healthcare and keep his promises. And we have a fixed election date. And it would be unfortunate for the premier to go against the first piece of legislation he actually passed the House. But if he calls it, I'm ready. We're ready, and we'll go into an election, and we'll fight hard to become the next government, so that we can enact the things that we have heard from Nova Scotians, that Nova Scotians want and need in the province. But like I said, we'll see what happens. See if we go early or not.
Should be interesting to see what happens, definitely. I really appreciate you taking time out of your busy schedule to answer my questions and speak with our viewers. Thank you very much.
Thank you for the opportunity.
Thank you for watching. Please tune in again to find out what we will be talking about on The Record.